Fate does not knock. It shatters the door. When an Omega, broken and bleeding, crawls into a tomb meant for kings, she does not know that her final breath will become his revelation. The Alpha entombed beneath stone, and Curse has waited 3 centuries for this moment, for this scent, for this claim that will unmake the world she knew. The crypt smelled of ancient death and forgotten glory. Elara pressed her trembling body against a cold stone wall, her fingers leaving bloody smears across carvings she couldn't read in the darkness. The iron collar around her throat, the mark of the mute Omega servant, bit into her flesh as she struggled for breath. Behind her, somewhere in the forest beyond the cemetery, she could hear them, the hunting party, their torches bright against the moonless sky, their voices calling for her capture. "Find the mute bitch. She poisoned the Luna." The accusation was a lie, but truth had never mattered for creatures like her. Elara had been born Omega in a world that worshipped alphas. Worse, she had been born with a voice, only to have it stolen at age 7 when the pack's former Luna decided that a servant who could speak was a servant who could spread secrets. The hot iron had burned her vocal cords to ruin, leaving her with nothing but silence and the psychic gift that had manifested in the void, the ability to absorb poisons, to draw sickness from others into her own body. A curse disguised as a blessing. Tonight, that curse had saved a life and damned her own. She had watched the rival Alpha, Cade of the Blood Moon Pack, slip nightshade into Luna Vera's wine during the treaty feast. Elara had seen the purple-black liquid swirl like smoke, had felt the malice radiating from Cade's cold smile. The Luna, pregnant with the pack's first heir in a decade, had lifted the goblet to her lips. Elara had no voice to scream a warning. So she had done the only thing her broken body could do. She had stumbled forward, knocked the goblet from the Luna's hand, and when the wine spilled across the table, she had pressed her palms into the pooling liquid, drawing the poison into her own skin, her own blood, her own dying cells. The pain had been instantaneous, a fire that consumed her from the inside out. And the Luna had screamed, not in gratitude, but in rage. "She attacks me. The mute Omega attacks me." Cade had smiled and said nothing. The pack had believed their Luna. They always did. Now Elara crouched in this forgotten crypt, her body convulsing as the nightshade worked through her system. She had absorbed worse, hemlock, wolfsbane, even the slow poison of silver, but never this much, never this fast. Her healing gift was burning itself out trying to neutralize the toxin, and she could feel her consciousness fragmenting at the edges. The crypt was her only sanctuary. The pack feared this place, the tomb of the cursed king, they called it. 300 years ago, an alpha king named Theron had been sealed here, not dead but sleeping, bound by a curse from a witch whose daughter he had refused to claim. The witch had declared that he would sleep until his true mate's presence broke the spell, and since true mates were myth, the curse was eternal. Elara had never believed in true mates. She had believed in survival. But survival was slipping away from her now. She crawled deeper into the crypt, past broken urns and scattered bones, until she reached the central chamber. There, bathed in the silver light filtering through cracks in the ancient ceiling, lay a stone sarcophagus. The lid was carved with the image of a warrior king, beautiful and terrible, his expression frozen in eternal fury. Elara collapsed against the sarcophagus, her blood, now black with poison, dripping onto the stone. She closed her eyes and waited for death. The first night, nothing happened. Elara drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting the poison with everything it had left. She dreamed of fire and ice, of a voice that rumbled like thunder beneath the earth, of eyes that glowed gold in the darkness. When she woke, she was still alive. Barely. The second night. The crypt had grown warmer. Elara, too weak to move, noticed it first in the stone beneath her cheek. The sarcophagus, which should have been cold as winter, radiated heat like a living thing. She pressed her poisoned hand against it, and the stone seemed to pulse in response, a slow rhythm like a heartbeat.
Impossible.
She must be hallucinating. But the warmth continued, spreading through her frozen limbs, and for the first time since she had absorbed the nightshade, the pain began to recede. Not disappear, never that, but become bearable. Outside, she could hear the hunting party growing closer. They had found the cemetery. They would find the crypt soon. Elara closed her eyes and prayed to gods who had never listened to Omegas. The third night, the sarcophagus lid shattered. Elara jerked awake as stone exploded outward, fragments raining down like hail. She scrambled backward, her ruined throat working uselessly to produce a scream that would never come. From the broken tomb, a figure rose. He was massive, easily 7 feet of corded muscle and predatory grace. His skin was bronze, unmarked by time, his hair a cascade of black that fell past his shoulders. He wore the remnants of ancient armor, leather, and metal that had somehow survived 3 centuries. But it was his eyes that froze Elara in place, molten gold, burning with an intelligence and fury that made her Omega instincts scream at her to submit, to bare her throat, to crawl. She did none of those things. She stared at him, this impossible creature, this alpha king torn from legend. Theron, because it could be no one else, turned his head slowly, taking in the crypt, the broken bones, the changed world beyond. Then his gaze fell on Elara, and everything stopped. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. His nostrils flared, his pupils dilated, and the expression that crossed his face was so primal, so utterly possessive, that Elara felt it like a physical touch. "You," he said, his voice rough from disuse, but carrying the weight of absolute command. "You woke me." Elara tried to speak, tried to explain, but only managed a broken rasp of air. Her hand flew to the iron collar at her throat. Explanation enough. Theron's eyes tracked the movement. His expression darkened. "Who did this to you?" Each word was carved from ice and fury. Elara shook her head. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except that she was dying, and now this creature from nightmares stood before her, and the hunting party was so close she could hear their individual voices. There, the crypt. Surround it. She can't escape. Theron's head snapped toward the entrance, his body shifting into a fighter's stance. Then he looked back at Elara, and something in his expression softened. Not weakness, but recognition. "You're poisoned," he said quietly. "Nightshade. I can smell it in your blood." She nodded.
Why?
How could she explain? She had no voice, no way to tell him about the Luna, about Cade's treachery, about the choice she had made to save a woman who now wanted her dead. But Theron stepped closer, moving with the predator's fluid grace, and knelt before her. This Alpha King, this legend, knelt in the dirt and broken stone and looked at her as if she were the only creature in existence. "Show me," he commanded, and pressed his palm to her forehead. The psychic connection was instantaneous. Elara gasped, a silent, airless sound, as Theron's consciousness flooded into hers. She felt him rifling through her memories with ruthless efficiency, her childhood, the burning of her throat, years of servitude and degradation, and finally, tonight, the poisoned wine, the Luna, her choice. When Theron withdrew, his eyes were no longer gold. They were black with rage. "You saved her," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "You sacrificed yourself for a woman who despises you, for a pack that treats you as less than nothing." Elara looked away. What did he want her to say? That she was foolish? She knew that already. "Look at me." The command was irresistible. Her eyes snapped back to his. "You are not foolish," Theron said, and the certainty in his voice something loose in her chest. "You are merciful. You are strong. You are," he stopped, his jaw clenching as if the next words physically pained him. "You are mine." The world tilted. 300 years, Theron continued, his hand moving to cup her face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence in his eyes. 300 years I have been trapped in darkness, waiting for the one soul in all the world that could wake me. The curse was specific. Only my true mate's presence could break the seal. Only the Omega meant for me.
No.
No, that was impossible. True mates were myth. She was nothing. She was. You are everything, Theron said, reading her doubt as easily as he had read her memories. And I will kill anyone who says otherwise. The crypt entrance exploded inward. Alpha Cade stood silhouetted against torchlight, flanked by a dozen warriors. Behind him, Luna Vera clung to his arm, her face twisted with vindictive pleasure. There,
Vera shrieked.
the mute Omega who tried to poison me. Seize her. The warriors advanced. Theron rose to his full height, placing himself between Elara and the hunting party. The movement was casual, almost lazy, but the power that rolled off him hit the warriors like a physical wall. They stumbled, their wolves whimpering in submission to an alpha whose bloodline predated their entire pack. You will not touch her, Theron said quietly. Cade's eyes widened. What are you? I am Theron, first of the royal line, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. And you have made a grave mistake. Vera laughed, a shrill, nervous sound. That's impossible. The cursed king is a legend. A story to frighten children. Then be frightened, child. Theron moved. One moment he stood before Elara. The next, he had crossed the 20 feet separating him from Cade in a blur of speed that defied physics. His hand closed around Cade's throat, lifting the alpha off his feet as easily as a child lifts a doll. I can smell your guilt, Theron said conversationally. Nightshade. You poisoned the wine meant for the pregnant Luna, knowing that suspicion would fall on the voiceless Omega servant.
Clever.
Cruel. Unforgivable. Cade's face was turning purple. I don't. Do not insult me with lies. Theron's grip tightened. I have walked this earth for 5 centuries. I have ended wars and toppled kingdoms. I can read guilt as easily as you read fear in your victim's eyes. He turned his head toward Luna Vera, who had gone white as snow. And you, Theron continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You condemned an innocent. You called for the death of the very Omega who saved your life and the life of your unborn child. What manner of monster are you? Vera's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Theron released Cade, letting him crumple to the ground, gasping. Then the Alpha King turned back to Elara, his expression transforming from fury to something infinitely tender. He crossed the distance between them and, before the assembled pack, before the Luna and the rival Alpha and the warriors who had hunted her, Theron knelt. Elara, he said, speaking her name for the first time, and it sounded like a prayer. I claim you as my true mate, my Omega, my queen. I claim you before witnesses, before the moon, before fate itself. The bond snapped into place like a key turning in a lock. Elara felt it, a golden thread that had always existed, waiting, connecting her soul to his across 3 centuries of separation. The poison in her veins began to burn away, consumed by the sheer force of the mating bond's power. The iron collar at her throat cracked, then shattered, falling away in pieces. And for the first time in 15 years, Elara felt her throat open. I accept, she whispered, her voice raw and broken but real. Theron's eyes blazed with triumph. He pulled her into his arms, cradling her against his chest, and when he bent his head to mark her, teeth sinking into the curve where her neck met her shoulder, the bond blazed so brightly that the assembled pack had to look away. When Theron raised his head, his mouth stained with her blood, he turned to face the pack. This Omega, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the crypt, has more honor in her broken body than all of you possess in your titled souls. She sacrificed herself for those who despised her. She showed mercy when she had every right to show hatred. She is worth 1,000 Lunas, 1,000 alphas, 1,000 of you. He looked down at Elara, his expression softening. True strength, Theron said, is not found in dominance or cruelty. It is found in the choice to be kind when kindness costs you everything. It is found in mercy, in sacrifice, in love. He turned back to the pack, his eyes hard as diamonds. This Omega is now your queen. You will treat her as such, or you will answer to me. And I promise you, you do not want to answer to me. Cade, still gasping on the ground, managed to choke out, "You can't just, the pack won't." "The pack will kneel," Theron said quietly, "or the pack will burn." It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. One by one, the warriors dropped to their knees. Luna Vera, her face streaked with tears, fell last, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Mercy," she whispered.
Please.
"I was wrong. I was so wrong." Theron looked at Elara, the question clear in his eyes. "Your choice." Elara, still cradled in her mate's arms, still feeling the phantom pain of 15 years of servitude, looked at the Luna who had condemned her. She should have felt hatred. She should have wanted revenge. Instead, she felt only exhaustion and a strange, distant pity. "Let her live," Elara rasped, her new voice gaining strength. "But let her remember. Let them all remember what they did to the voiceless Omega they thought was worthless." Theron smiled, a fierce, proud expression. "As my queen commands." He stood, lifting Elara as if she weighed nothing, and began to walk toward the crypt entrance. The pack parted before them like water before a ship's prow. At the threshold, Theron paused and looked back. "Cade of the Blood Moon Pack," he said coldly. "You have until sunrise to leave these territories. If I see you again, I will not be merciful." Cade, broken and humiliated, could only nod. As they emerged into the night, Elara looked up at the sky. The moon, which had been dark when she entered the crypt, now hung full and bright above them, as if fate itself was celebrating. "What happens now?" she whispered. Theron looked down at her, his golden eyes warm with something that might have been love, might have been destiny, might have been both. "Now," he said, "we rebuild. A new pack. A new kingdom. One founded not on dominance, but on the principle you embodied tonight. That mercy is the highest form of strength." He pressed his forehead to hers, the mating bond humming between them like a living thing. "And we live, my Omega. We live the life that fate always intended for us. Fate does not reward the powerful, it rewards the worthy. In a world that measures value by strength and status, true nobility is found in the choice to be kind when kindness costs everything." The Omega who saved her enemy became a queen. The servant who had no voice became the one whose words would reshape a kingdom. What would you sacrifice for someone who despises you? And when fate finally recognizes your worth, will you choose mercy or revenge? Tell me, what would you have done in Elara's place?